racist gatekeeper at a luxury event called the police on a black guest, unaware he was the keynote speaker. It was a night where lights danced across the dark sky, creating a magical atmosphere outside the Grand Majestic Hotel. Luxury cars lined the street, sparkling enticingly. The sound of high heels clicking and the swish of glamorous gowns broke the night's silence, ushering guests into a promised annual gala filled with prestige and opulence. Every corner of the hotel was adorned with fresh flowers, crystal chandeliers, and tables brimming with gourmet food. The enticing aroma of delectable dishes wafted through the air, making the stomachs of passers-by rumble. At the entrance, Richard, a gatekeeper in his 50s, stood tall with an arrogant demeanor. Dressed in a sharp black suit and perfectly tied tie, he appeared to be an unyielding guardian. His eyes scanned the crowd, landing on each approaching guest, assessing and categorizing them in his mind. His years of experience at similar events made him believe he was a legitimate judge of character. Anxiety and arrogance fused within Richard, making him feel powerful on this lavish night. "I know who belongs here," he thought, considering himself the protector of the night's elitism. As guests passed by, Richard observed intently. A man in a white suit stepped in, and Richard nodded respectfully, allowing him entry. "Good evening, sir. Thank you for attending," he said, his voice soft yet authoritative. He aimed to maintain a professional image, but his biases began to guide his actions and thoughts. Each time someone with a different appearance approached, he felt a wave of discomfort. When the spotlight shone brightly, a woman in a seductive red gown stepped forward. She possessed an enchanting charm and undeniable confidence. It was Aisha, a renowned speaker in technology and social activism, known for her bold views and ideas that often challenged the status quo. Tonight she wanted to relax and enjoy the moment before speaking on stage. However, as she approached the entrance, Richard sensed a different aura. There was something about her that made him uneasy. "Good evening, miss," he said, his voice cold and skeptical. "Your name?" Aisha smiled, eagerly handing over her invitation. "I'm Aisha Thompson. I'm scheduled to speak tonight." Richard took the invitation and regarded it as if it were a mere piece of paper. "I don't see your name on the list," he replied, his tone challenging. Aisha's anxiety began to mount. She knew who she was and how important her presence was tonight, but Richard appeared unyielding. "There might be a mistake. Please contact the committee." "I'm sure they can confirm," Aisha explained, trying to remain calm despite her racing heart. Richard was indifferent. He ignored her explanation and began conversing with other visitors at the entrance, as if Aisha were invisible. Embarrassment and anger washed over Aisha. She thought perhaps she was just at the wrong place, but seeing the indifferent faces of other guests, she realized she needed to stand firm. "Sir, I understand you're doing your job, but I'm the keynote speaker." "It's crucial for me to be here," Aisha attempted to explain again, her voice rising slightly. The crowd began to gather, drawing their attention. Some looked at Aisha with puzzled expressions, while others appeared to side with Richard. "It seems I must ensure the security of this event. I cannot allow someone unknown to enter," he shouted loudly, raising his voice. Aisha felt increasingly cornered and pressured. Around her, the guests began to whisper, creating doubt and discomfort. Richard glanced at Aisha, appearing doubtful. "Then show proof to support your claim," he insisted. His feelings strengthened that this woman was nothing more than an intruder. He sensed support from some guests who began nodding in agreement with his opinion. Aisha's anger peaked. She felt humiliated in front of people who only saw her appearance, not who she was. "I am not a stranger. I am a professional," she retorted, struggling to contain the emotions threatening to explode. Richard looked towards the crowd, and Aisha felt the questioning and doubtful stares. Disbelief and anger clashed within her, creating a sense of alienation among a crowd that was supposed to celebrate diversity. "He won't let me in just because of my skin color," she thought, igniting her resolve to fight back. "If you cannot prove who you are, I cannot let you in," Richard replied coldly, his voice dripping with indifference. Aisha felt her heart race as if all the energy around her focused on this confrontation. She didn't want to be the face of hidden discrimination, but at the same time, she felt trapped in an unfair situation. Amid the increasingly curious crowd, Aisha decided to fight back. "I contacted the committee earlier, and they know I'm coming. Please give me a chance to prove it," she shouted, her voice filled with determination. Richard remained unmoved. He pulled out his phone, and Aisha felt her heart stop momentarily. As Richard began dialing, she knew what was about to happen. This injustice had gone on too long, and she couldn't let it slide without a fight. "Do you really want to call the police?" "That's excessive," Aisha challenged, her voice trembling with emotion. However, Richard had already gone too far to back down. He believed that calling the police was the best step to maintain order. As Richard spoke with the officers, Aisha looked around and sensed the suspicious stares from other guests. Some whispered among themselves, spreading doubt and adding pressure to an already tense situation. Aisha felt trapped in a cycle of injustice, alienated among those who should be celebrating diversity. She tried to think clearly, searching for a way to prove herself. Maybe I can contact someone who can help, she thought, trying to recall the committee's number. But as the police arrived, the atmosphere grew even more uncertain. 3 officers approached, looking serious and prepared to address the situation. Aisha felt anxious, but she also knew she had to speak up. Taking a deep breath, she decided to confront this situation, determined not to let prejudice ruin her important night. I'm Aisha Thompson, and I'm here to speak at this event. I urge you to listen to me, Aisha said firmly to the officers, striving to appear unafraid. Richard, feeling challenged, stood beside her with a disbelieving expression. She's just trying to sneak in. Look at her appearance. She doesn't fit in with the other guests, he shouted, adding fuel to an already raging fire. The police turned, confused by the situation. Miss, we just want to ensure everything is safe. Do you have proof of your attendance tonight? One officer asked cautiously. Hearing the question, Aisha felt nervous. She rummaged through her bag, hoping to find a business card or document that could confirm her identity. But all she retrieved were some papers and her phone. Wait a moment. I must have proof on my phone, she said, her eyes shining with hope. Richard watched with a sneer. He felt pressured as the situation began to shift, and he couldn't control it. He was used to being the center of attention, but tonight, all eyes were on Aisha. And he disliked it. This won't end well for you, miss, he warned. After a few seconds that felt like an eternity, Aisha found the confirmation email sent by the event committee. She lifted her phone to show the police. Here it is. I'm scheduled to speak tonight. You can contact the committee to confirm, she stated, her voice now filled with conviction. As the police looked at Aisha's phone, Richard watched in disbelief. This isn't fair, he shouted, feeling his position threatened. He tried to undermine Aisha's confidence. She's just seeking attention. You can't just trust her. But the police, after a quick check, began to doubt Richard. We'll verify this information. Miss, if you're indeed telling the truth, we'll make sure you can enter, one officer said. The atmosphere around them grew tenser. Aisha felt her heart racing, hope and uncertainty mixing together. She prayed for a positive outcome and that her voice and presence would be accepted. And in an instant, everything hinged on how she could turn this situation around before it was too late. Aisha stood outside the Grand Majestic Hotel, surrounded by a crowd packed in the hallway, anxiously waiting while trying to calm herself. The atmosphere felt increasingly tense, as if the air around her had grown heavier. The neon lights flickered invitingly, but none could dispel the tension creeping up her spine. She knew tonight was a big opportunity, yet she found herself caught in a battle she shouldn't have to fight. Richard, the gatekeeper, stood with an air of arrogance, his eyes scrutinizing every move Aisha made. In his stiff black suit and neatly tied tie, he looked like a palace guard unwilling to let anyone step into the realm of luxury. He contemplated who was worthy of entry, assuming he had the authority to dictate who could pass. Good evening, Miss, Richard greeted her, his voice cold and skeptical. Your name? Aisha smiled, hope flickering in her heart. I'm Aisha Thompson. I'm scheduled to speak tonight. As Richard took her invitation and examined it with a doubtful gaze, a feeling of discomfort crawled inside Aisha. I don't see your name on the list, he said, his tone challenging. Anxiety and uncertainty began to gnaw at her confidence. She knew who she was and what she had accomplished, but Richard didn't care. He only saw her skin color, not the achievements she had earned. There might be a mistake, Aisha explained, trying to remain calm despite her racing heart. Please contact the organizers. I'm sure they can confirm. Richard ignored her, turning to speak with other guests, dismissing Aisha entirely. Shame and anger began to envelop her. Frustration bubbled within, as if pressure was closing in from all sides. This is an event meant to celebrate diversity. She thought, why should I feel alienated just because of my appearance? She felt as if all eyes were on her, watching this confrontation with curiosity. Some looked at her with sympathetic gazes, while others shrugged, indifferent to the injustice unfolding. But Aisha knew she couldn't let this injustice crush her spirit. She had to stand her ground. Sir, I understand you're doing your job, Aisha tried to explain again, her voice rising as she struggled to contain her simmering anger. But I'm the keynote speaker tonight. It's vital for me to be here and share my experiences. Richard smirked at her. It seems I have to ensure the safety of this event. I can't let strangers in recklessly. Hearing this, Aisha felt everything she had worked for crumbling before her. I'm not a stranger. I'm a professional. This is an opportunity to share my voice, not to be dismissed. Her voice grew louder as she fought to control the emotions bubbling over. At that moment, the crowd began to pay closer attention. Some guests started to voice their support for Aisha. Let her in. She has a right to be here, shouted a man in a suit, adding to her encouragement. Richard responded with indifference, but Aisha felt a new energy coursing through her. She had to seize this moment to stand up for her rights and the rights of everyone who had ever felt rejected because of their appearance. I want all of you to know that my struggle is our struggle, Aisha said, drawing the crowd's attention, which now began to cheer. Richard, seeing the situation spiraling out of control, began to lose his grip. Don't let her words sway you. She's not one of us, he shouted, trying to reclaim the crowd's attention. But Aisha's voice grew stronger. We're all here to celebrate diversity. And everyone deserves to feel accepted. She poured her heart into her words, as if each phrase was part of a larger fight. The arriving police attempted to diffuse the tension. Miss, we just want to ensure everything is safe. If you have proof of your presence tonight, we'll let you in, one officer said cautiously, but Aisha could sense the uncertainty in their voice. Aisha began to rummage through her bag, hoping to find a business card or other document that could confirm her identity. As she searched, her heartbeat quickened. All her hopes rested on this night, an opportunity to speak and make a difference. But as she pulled out her phone, all she found were random papers and old notes. No, she thought, panic rising. Richard seized the moment of confusion, not wasting a second. See, she can't provide proof. This is a waste of time, he sneered, adding pressure to Aisha, who was already on edge. Yet within Aisha, the fire of courage ignited. She took a deep breath, striving to calm her mind. Wait a moment. I must have proof in my email, she said, trying to reassure herself and everyone around her. Family and friends present began to rally behind Aisha with encouraging shouts. We're here for you, Aisha cried, an old friend, triggering more cheers from the crowd. The support lifted her spirits, and she felt strength gathering around her. Richard, on the other hand, felt cornered by the situation. The power he had once felt was now threatened. This is all just a game. We don't have time to waste on her, he yelled, growing increasingly impatient. But Aisha was undeterred. She dug into her phone again, and after a few seconds she found the confirmation email from the event organizers. With hope swelling, she raised her phone high, showing it to the officers. Look, this is my confirmation email, she exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. I'm scheduled to speak tonight. The police examined Aisha's phone, then turned to Richard, who looked taken aback. If this is true, we will let you in, one officer said, his tone softer. This can't be, Richard shouted, his face flushing red. He tried to maintain control, which was slipping further away. She's just trying to sneak in. But the crowd had already stopped listening to Richard. They began to chant in support of Aisha. Let her in. Her voice matters. The tense situation had now shifted in Aisha's favor. She felt a new spirit flowing within her, replacing the fear that had haunted her. I'm here not just for myself, Aisha said, her voice filled with strength. I'm here to represent everyone who feels overlooked. We all deserve to be heard. The police nodded, and one officer extended his hand toward Aisha. All right, Aisha, we will let you in. Let's resolve this situation positively, he said firmly, signaling that the night's tension had peaked. Aisha felt relief wash over her, but she knew this was just the beginning. As she stepped through the door, the crowd erupted in cheers while Richard stood silent, his face still flushed. Aisha realized she had won this battle, but the journey ahead would be far more challenging. As she entered the brightly lit hall, with the aroma of delicious food and the smiles of supportive faces surrounding her, she felt a surge of positive energy. Each step reminded her of all the struggles she had faced to reach this point. She had to ensure her voice was heard. That tonight wasn't just about her, but about everyone who felt overlooked. She glanced back at the exit, seeing Richard cornered, unsure of what to say. She wouldn't let prejudice silence her tonight. Aisha gathered her courage and conviction. She would speak not only for herself, but for everyone who had ever faced rejection. Tonight she would share her voice, and her message would resonate far beyond the barriers created by people like Richard. She gazed at the crowd, now eager for her speech, feeling the heavy weight of responsibility on her shoulders. But in her heart, she knew she wasn't alone. She would carry everyone who supported her with her. And tonight would be a moment to remember. Aisha stepped into the grand hall, surrounded by the glitter of crystal lights hanging from the high ceiling, creating an atmosphere that seemed glamorous and cheerful. There were tables beautifully decorated with fresh flowers and shimmering candles, while guests chatted enthusiastically, the sounds of laughter and conversation echoing throughout the room. However, despite the shining and joyful surroundings, Aisha felt a restless vibration within herself. Her heart raced, and each step felt heavy, as if she were treading on the footprints of uncertainty. As she ventured further into the hall, several faces in the crowd turned towards her, highlighting attention and curiosity. A woman in a striking red dress approached her, her smile genuine and full of warmth. "I saw what happened outside. You're amazing. I'm so glad you made it in," she said in an enthusiastic tone that warmed Aisha's heart. Aisha smiled back, feeling her spirit lift slightly. "Thank you," she replied, trying to suppress the tremor of nerves. "Tonight is very important to me." As time passed, the event's moderator, a middle-aged man in a classy suit, appeared on stage with a friendly smile. "Welcome, everyone. Tonight we gather to celebrate diversity, innovation, and voices that are often overlooked. We are very excited to introduce our keynote speaker, Aisha Thompson." Cheers and applause resonated through the crowd, giving Aisha a bit of strength to overcome her anxiety. She raised her hand to greet them, but inside, fear still burned. Would she be able to make the impact she desired? Could she convey her message clearly and touch people's hearts? With a steady step, Aisha walked onto the stage. Each step felt as though it carried a heavy burden. As she stood in front of the microphone, the crowd seemed to wait in hopeful anticipation. Aisha could feel the tension in the air, and she took a deep breath, trying to ease her nervousness. Tonight, Aisha began, her voice calm yet firm. "We are not just celebrating individual achievements, but also our journey as a community. I stand here tonight not only for myself, but for everyone who has ever felt unwanted or overlooked. I want to talk about the power of our voices and how we can create change together." As she spoke, Aisha felt the positive energy from the crowd, a wave of encouragement flowing towards her. "I have experienced rejection, just as many of us have. There were times when I felt not good enough, not strong enough. But I learned that true strength comes from the courage to speak up, to demand our place in this world." Some audience members began to nod, and Aisha felt her courage rising within her. She continued, "We all have stories, stories of struggle and success, and every voice, regardless of background, deserves to be heard. We cannot let prejudice dictate who belongs in this space." Cheers and applause echoed in the hall, urging Aisha to continue. She saw some inspired faces, which gave her strength. "When we unite, we create opportunities for everyone. No one should feel alienated because of their skin color or how they look. We are part of a larger network, that can support and uplift each other." Aisha looked at the crowd passionately, feeling positive energy flow through her. "When we speak and listen to one another, we create a safe space for all. Let's build a world where our voices are not only heard but valued." The crowd's response began to swell, and Aisha felt the burning courage within her. She saw some inspired faces, and it invigorated her. "We cannot let anyone feel isolated. Tonight, let's show that we stand together, embracing our diversity." Her voice trembled with passion, and Aisha knew that every word she spoke was part of a larger struggle. Tonight is about celebrating our differences, but also about reminding ourselves of our responsibility to make this world a better place. We must fight for justice and equality, not only for ourselves, but also for generations to come. Aisha spotted Richard in the corner of the room, his face flushed with anger. She could feel his rage, but it didn't diminish her bravery. "Don't let anyone define who you are. You are the architect of your own story," she continued, staring at the crowd with intensity. "And together we can change the narrative." The hall erupted with applause and cheers. Aisha felt as if she were soaring, the crowd's spirit making her feel stronger. She had fought against injustice, and now her voice had found a way to speak. This was the moment she had dreamed of, and now she stood before people who supported her. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight," Aisha concluded, feeling tears of emotion welling up in her eyes. "Let's all continue this struggle together, to create a fairer and more inclusive world. Our voices are our strength, and tonight I hope we can all commit to listening to one another." She ended her speech to a thunderous round of applause. The crowd stood, faces shining with pride and support. Aisha felt proud and grateful, feeling the flow of love from those around her. After finishing her speech, Aisha stepped back from the stage, and a throng of people surrounded her, cheering her on with hugs and congratulations. You were amazing." That was so inspiring, an old friend exclaimed enthusiastically, and Aisha felt the heavy burden in her heart lift away. But amid the excitement, Aisha couldn't shake off the thoughts of Richard. She felt the need to confront him. Richard had represented all the prejudices she had ever faced, and at that moment she wanted to speak to him directly. She promised herself that tonight was not just about her victory, but also about making a deeper change. With determination, Aisha searched for Richard in the crowd. She found him standing in the corner, his face looking angry and confused. When their eyes met, Aisha felt the tension flowing between them. She didn't want to retaliate against Richard's anger, but she wanted to explain. "Richard," Aisha called, taking a breath before approaching him. "I want to talk to you." Richard looked surprised to hear his name called. He tried to hide his anger on his face. "What more do you want?" he asked sarcastically. Aisha took a deep breath, trying to calm herself before speaking. "I'm here to share my voice, just like you did. I don't want us to clash. I want us to understand each other." Richard scoffed, but deep down he felt a flicker of doubt. "Why do you feel the need to speak? Why do you feel you need to be here?" "Because my voice matters," Aisha explained, looking at Richard intently. "I want to show that everyone has the right to feel accepted and valued. I stand here to represent those who don't have a voice, those who may have felt alienated like I once did." She could see doubt in Richard's face, but she didn't stop. "I want you to know that I don't want to fight you. I want us to work together to create a better space for everyone. This isn't about winning or losing, but about how we can build a better world together." Richard seemed to pause, caught in his thoughts. "You don't understand," he said softly. "I just want to protect this event. I'm only doing what I think is right." Aisha nodded, feeling a bit of empathy. "I understand, but we need to recognize that right can mean many things to many people. Let's try to understand each other's perspectives." The atmosphere between them began to soften, and Aisha felt hope for finding common ground. "We're all part of this community, Richard. We need to support one another, not tear each other down." After a moment, Richard sighed. "Maybe I judged too quickly. Maybe there's something I need to learn." Aisha smiled, feeling a sense of relief. "I'm still learning too, Richard. Let's support each other, not just tonight, but moving forward." With that, Aisha extended her hand, and Richard hesitated but eventually shook her hand gently. He knew this was just the first step, but he felt that tonight had opened a path for the possibility of change. As the event concluded and guests began to disperse, Aisha gazed at the crowd with a deep sense of gratitude. She knew that even though tonight had ended, her struggle was just beginning. She would continue to speak, continue to fight, and continue to advocate for the voices of everyone who had ever felt marginalized. Aisha left the hall with confident strides, her heart pounding with hope. She knew that her voice would echo far beyond the existing boundaries, and this was the beginning of something greater. Aisha stepped out of the hall, her heart racing, feeling the profound impact of the experience she had just undergone. Relief and excitement flowed within her, but she also sensed a greater burden of responsibility on her shoulders. Although tonight marked an achievement for her, she knew her struggle was just beginning. The prejudice and rejection she faced came not only from Richard but also from the broader society. Aisha felt she needed to do more than just speak. She wanted to create real and lasting change. On her way home, she reflected on the words she had shared on stage. Inspired by the support of those around her, she recognized that concrete actions were needed to back up all the motivational words. She aimed to ensure her community had a space to speak and be heard, not just on the night of the event. In the following days, Aisha began planning concrete steps. She reached out to several friends involved in nonprofit organizations focused on diversity and inclusion issues. "We need to start with our own community," she said as they gathered at a local cafe. The atmosphere was warm, with the enticing aroma of coffee and the low buzz of other guests chatting. "Let's invite people from various backgrounds to share their stories. By listening to each other, we can build bridges of understanding." Her friends enthusiastically agreed with Aisha, and they quickly began planning their first event. They arranged to invite speakers from diverse backgrounds, creating an inclusive and welcoming atmosphere. Aisha felt excited about this idea and more determined to make the event a safe space for everyone. When the day of the event arrived, Aisha and her team worked hard to prepare everything. They decorated the room with cheerful colors, set up seating, and ensured everyone felt welcomed. Every detail, from the food served to the decorations, was carefully considered to create a comfortable and friendly environment. As guests started to arrive, Aisha felt her heart race. She hoped everything she planned would go smoothly and have a positive impact. The event began with a warm welcome from Aisha. Her voice echoed in the room filled with hope and excitement. She introduced the first speaker, an elderly woman named Maria, who shared her experiences as an immigrant. Maria's story touched many hearts, and Aisha saw how everyone in the room connected through the experiences expressed. The atmosphere felt warm and intimate, and Aisha felt proud of what they had achieved. She paid attention to every facial expression among the listeners, listening intently to their reactions. After several speakers shared their stories, Aisha decided to open a question and answer session. She knew this was an important moment, where people could feel free to speak and share their opinions. "Anyone who wants to share, please raise your hand," she said. And hands began to rise. A young man stood up and said, "I feel like my voice is never heard. Sometimes I feel isolated because of my background." Aisha nodded empathetically. "That's so important to share. We all have different experiences, and every voice deserves to be heard. Let's create a space where we can support each other," she said, inviting everyone to engage. The discussion continued, and Aisha felt her energy rising. Each person who spoke, each story shared, reinforced her belief that they were creating real change. When an adult woman recounted her bitter experience facing discrimination at work, Aisha felt sympathy and a resurgence of spirit. The woman's voice trembled as she shared her struggle for recognition and respect in a male-dominated workplace. Everyone in the room listened attentively, and Aisha could see how each story built bridges of understanding among them. "Our stories aren't just our own," Aisha said when the woman finished speaking. "This is a collective voice that shouldn't be silenced. We not only need to listen but also support each other and create spaces for everyone to speak up." As the event concluded, Aisha felt proud of what they had accomplished. The atmosphere in the room was filled with positive energy and hope, and she felt warmth from everyone present. However, as she prepared to leave, Aisha saw Richard standing outside the room. Her heart raced again, but this time not out of anxiety. She felt there was an opportunity to speak with Richard directly, to explain her intentions and the impact she hoped to achieve. "Richard," Aisha called as she approached him. "Thank you for coming." Richard looked hesitant, but he eventually replied, "I wanted to know what you're doing here. I saw how this event went, and it was amazing." Aisha smiled. "We wanted to create a space for all voices. We want to ensure everyone feels welcomed. This isn't just about one night, it's about building bridges between communities." Richard nodded, and Aisha could sense sincerity in his expression. "I didn't realize how important this was until I saw it myself. I want to learn more." Aisha felt a new sense of hope. "Let's work together. If you want, I can help you understand more about different experiences. We can do something meaningful." Richard smiled, and Aisha felt a bridge beginning to form between them. "I want to be part of this change." They stood outside the room, discussing possibilities for collaboration and how they could work together to create more events like this in the future. Aisha felt her spirit rising again. This was a small step, but it was very meaningful. They committed to designing programs that engaged various communities, strengthening solidarity and understanding. Weeks passed, and Aisha became increasingly involved in the nonprofit organization. They successfully organized several other events that attracted many people from diverse backgrounds. Aisha felt the collective power that emerged when people gathered to share their experiences. Each story told became a step toward deeper understanding. She aimed to continue encouraging others to speak up and share, creating a platform where marginalized voices could be heard. One afternoon, Aisha received an email from Richard. He wrote about how he wanted to organize a larger event, inviting more speakers and involving a broader community. Aisha felt excited and touched, realizing that the small steps they took had created a larger impact. Richard also expressed his desire to share his own experiences and how he had learned so much from his interactions with Aisha and the wider community. As they prepared for the event, Aisha felt confident and optimistic. She knew that change wouldn't always come quickly, but every step taken was part of the journey toward a better world. She hoped these small steps would continue to inspire others to speak up, share, and support each other. The new event became a significant milestone for Aisha and Richard. With support from the community, they invited speakers from various backgrounds ranging from artists, activists, to community leaders. In each session, the atmosphere grew increasingly familiar. Aisha felt as if they were assembling a jigsaw puzzle, where each piece represented different stories and experiences, all contributing to a larger picture of diversity. When the day of the event arrived, Aisha and Richard stood on stage together, ready to welcome everyone who came. The room was filled with laughter and conversation, but when Aisha took the microphone, the atmosphere began to settle. "Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to see so many new and familiar faces here today. Let's create a space where every voice is heard and valued." As the event progressed, Aisha felt the positive vibrations in the room. The moment when a young man shared his story about the struggle to be accepted in his own community became one of the most memorable. He spoke about how the injustices he faced shaped his identity and how he was determined to change that narrative. When he finished, Aisha could see tears in many listeners' eyes, indicating the strength of the message shared. Aisha seized the moment to encourage everyone to share their experiences. Every story, whether good or bad, has the power to inspire and open our eyes. Let's listen to each other with open hearts. She watched hands start to rise again, and the atmosphere in the room became even livelier. When a young woman shared the challenges she faced as a student from an underprivileged background, many listeners felt connected. Aisha felt proud to see the spirit of mutual support growing among everyone. They began to talk to one another, sharing stories and experiences in ways they never had before. As the event approached its end, Aisha felt not just satisfied but also hopeful. She saw shining faces, sensing a wave of change beginning to flow in her community. She stood before everyone, feeling connected to all the stories shared. She knew tonight marked the beginning of something greater. As everyone began to leave, Aisha and Richard exchanged glances. "We've done something amazing," Richard said, smiling. "I feel like we've just begun a long journey." Aisha nodded. "And we can't stop here. This is just the beginning. We need to continue creating spaces for all voices and ensure this message doesn't fade away." They both agreed to continue their collaboration and plan more events in the future. Aisha felt confident knowing these small steps would continue to inspire others to speak, share, and support one another. As they parted ways that night, Aisha felt she was not just building bridges between communities but also paving the way for a better future. She understood that the road ahead would be full of challenges, but she was ready to face them all. She vowed to keep fighting, ensuring that every voice, no matter how small, would be heard and valued. With every step taken, she was confident they were writing a new story, one of courage, understanding, and love that connects everyone. Months passed after the big event, and Aisha felt a wave of positivity spreading throughout her community. Each event they organized attracted more attention, and people began to share their stories. Aisha and Richard collaborated more closely, planning programs that not only raised awareness but also empowered individuals to be agents of change in their daily lives. One day, while sitting in her favorite cafe, Aisha received a text message from Richard. "I want to meet. There's something I want to discuss." Curiosity and a hint of anxiety bubbled in her heart. She didn't know what Richard wanted to say, but she sensed it was important. They met in a park surrounded by lush trees, where the sounds of nature were clear. Richard looked more serious than usual, and Aisha could feel the tension in the air. "Aisha," he began, "I've spoken with some community leaders about the potential for creating a larger program at the city level." Aisha was taken aback. "Wow, that's amazing. What are you thinking?" Richard explained his plan to hold a diversity festival that would involve various organizations, artists, and speakers from diverse backgrounds. "I believe this could be a way to reach more people and make them feel involved," he continued. "We could invite schools to participate, hold workshops, and showcase diverse arts and cultures." Aisha couldn't hide her enthusiasm. "That's a brilliant idea. We can engage the community in a fun and educational way. This could be a great opportunity to show how powerful our diversity is." After hours of discussion and planning details, they both felt excited about this new project. They agreed to assemble a team, contact sponsors, and start organizing everything. In the weeks that followed, Aisha and Richard traveled around the city, speaking with organizations, artists, and volunteers willing to help them. Support poured in, and people began to feel the same excitement they had. When the day of the festival finally arrived, Aisha felt both excited and anxious. They had done a lot of preparation, but she knew that things don't always go as planned. However, as she stood in front of the enthusiastic crowd, she felt positive energy flowing. The sounds of music, children's laughter, and the aroma of food from various cultures filled the air, creating a festive atmosphere. "Welcome to the Diversity Festival," Aisha announced enthusiastically. "Today we gather to celebrate the beauty of diverse backgrounds and experiences. Let's learn from one another and respect each other." The festival unfolded with various art performances, interactive workshops, and discussion sessions. Each booth offered something unique, from regional cuisines, art exhibitions, to musical and dance performances. Aisha walked from one booth to another, talking to people and listening to their stories. She witnessed how people from different backgrounds interacted, shared laughter, and created new memories. In the midst of the festival, Richard approached Aisha. "Look at how many people have come. This is much bigger than we imagined," he said, his face shining with excitement. Aisha smiled, looking around with gratitude. We did it, Richard. This is proof that when we come together, we can make significant changes. That evening, as the festival neared its end, Aisha and Richard gathered all the speakers and performers on stage for the closing session. Today is a first step toward a more inclusive and diverse future, Aisha spoke to the crowd. We hope that today's experiences inspire you all to continue sharing stories and creating safe spaces for each other. As the event concluded, Aisha felt proud of what they had achieved. She saw happy faces among the crowd, heard laughter, and felt a strong sense of togetherness. They were not only celebrating diversity, they had also built a stronger, supportive community. After the festival, Aisha and Richard received a lot of positive feedback. They even got offers to hold similar events in other cities, and many people wanted to get involved further. Aisha felt they were truly creating something impactful. Amid all the busyness, Aisha didn't forget the struggles she had faced earlier. She knew that while these small steps offered hope, much work remained to be done. She was determined to continue fighting for justice and equality, ensuring that marginalized voices were heard. A few months later, Aisha was invited to speak at a national conference on diversity. There, she shared her experiences and how the festival they held became a model for other communities. We all have a role in creating a better world, she told the audience of hundreds. No voice is too small to make a difference. When we dare to speak up and listen to one another, we open the door for change. At the end of her speech, Aisha felt connected to everyone in the room. She saw passionate faces, and she knew that this struggle was bigger than herself. She felt inspired by the people around her, who were committed to creating positive change. As the conference concluded and attendees began to leave, Aisha felt hopeful. She knew that this journey was far from over, but the steps they had taken showed that change was possible. With community support, strong collaboration, and the courage to speak out, they could create a better world. On her way home, Aisha reflected on the journey she had taken. She recalled that first night at the event when Richard called the police due to prejudice. Now, in the same place, they had created a safe space for all voices. Change was indeed possible, as long as there was courage to fight. She looked out the car window, watching the stars in the night sky. Each star seemed to represent a new hope, and she knew that every small step could lead to something greater. With renewed determination, Aisha promised to continue this struggle, not just for herself, but for everyone who felt marginalized. That night, as Aisha lay in bed, she felt at peace. She knew that the fight for justice and equality was long, but she did not feel alone. Together with Richard and the community they had built, she was confident that a better future could be realized. And with that spirit, she fell asleep filled with hope, ready to continue the next steps in this meaningful journey.